inertia's a bitch. And like that inertia, which is a tendency to do the same thing that you've always said, like it's a psychological issue that we're mostly dealing with. And it's over.
Katie Bowman.
Brad Kearns, how are you?
So glad to catch up with you in these fabulous studios
IRL.
of the Power Project.
In real life.
That's right. It's very important these days, especially in your line of work and your life philosophy. So I admire you from afar, how your family lives, that natural lifestyle. And we got a lot to talk about today because things are getting complicated. We need to slow things down, reflect, and see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, let's talk about movement as something that takes us down a notch in all the best ways. In all the best ways.
So how do we get taken down a notch?
Well, one way that I've been seeking to do that is helping people understand this concept of dynamic rest or active rest. And I know athletes probably have. Like, how would you define active rest from an athlete's perspective?
Yeah, well, I'm learning that I have some work to do here because I'm trying to be a sprinter and a jumper, which is power and explosive, and then I go and take a rest day of an easy bike ride of an hour, and I get scolded by my sprint coach because it's not really rest. You're training the aerobic system when you're out there doing that, and that's my mentality. But true restorative exercise is where you come in. And that's like, switching from stand-up desk, sitting on the floor, moving around, taking breaks, doing the wall angels. And even for athletes, I think they need to get way better at, having a more movement-oriented lifestyle rather than slamming the workout and then perhaps sitting around on the couch and not, there's no in between. It's either like crush a workout or you're back at your laptop and sitting on your phone.
So like, your coach doesn't want you going for tell me about this bike ride. When you say I'm going for a bike ride, what does that mean? Distance, length, intensity.
Let's say I'm pedaling for an easy hour because I like to be outdoors and enjoy the fresh air and look at the river.
Are you on a beach cruiser?
No, I'm pedaling on a mountain bike, but my heart rate is in the aerobic zone, so it's very comfortably paced.
Okay.
And so I have always counted that as a recovery ride because I've been an endurance athlete my whole life. But now as I'm, claiming to want to transform into a sprinter.
Well, you're trying to train your fibers to being more of a power person.
That's right.
You're basically untraining maybe some of that by trying to also be a low-grade endurance athlete.
That's right. And so now, especially, as you know, Mark Sisson and I are releasing a book called Born to Walk about the wonderful benefits of a walking-oriented lifestyle. And I've never walked hardly anywhere in my life because I've either run at 6-minute pace or 9-minute pace if I wanted to take it easy. But I'm always on the move and, in this workout mindset. And I think it's an important transition, even for athletes, to realize that probably the health priority comes with a movement-oriented lifestyle. And then secondly, whatever your fitness and athletic goals are, sure, those can be also promoting fitness and longevity, but not without that first piece getting handled, really.
Would your coach consider a walk a rest day activity?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Coach Cynthia Monteleone, a shout out to her. She's a world champion sprinter and she coaches a lot of sprinters, Olympic level and masters level. But it's a new education for me because I've always thought of recovery as something that still, counts points along your weekly mileage and all those endurance notions that it's important for endurance athletes to just put in a massive amount of volume, a lot of it at a slow pace, because that builds the foundation for the time when they do go and do hill repeats or something that's challenging. But when it comes to really anaerobic activity, the anaerobic system thrives on high intensity, low volume, and extensive rest. So all those things are in direct contrast with what the aerobic system thrives on, which is a lot of volume, low intensity. You don't need a lot of recovery after taking an easy bike ride. You can do that 7 days a week, 365 days a year, like a lot of endurance athletes do.
You can, not everybody.
Yeah, I mean, whatever your level is at. And you make a comment there that's important because most casual endurance athletes are overdoing it to the extreme excess and the extreme detriment to their overall general health. And we see that in the injury rates, and we see that in the failure to improve body composition despite running 30 miles a week every single week, week in, week out, and shuffling and struggling through these workouts in the name of fitness, but it's too exhausting.
And not really even in the name of fitness, in the name of performance. So I'm listening to everything you're saying, and I'm hearing delineations that maybe need to be made between an athlete, and then you've also you use another type of athlete. So what was the middle of the road athlete? Kind of like the casual athlete.
Yeah, there's someone who has endurance type of goals, and then there's very few people these days that have power, explosive sprint goals. There's not that many jiu-jitsu fighters in the gym. There 2 of them were around this building, and there's only 12 in the whole city, whatever. But this is something that we lose when we age, and it's super important to try to continue with anaerobic exercise to maintain muscle mass, maintain explosive power. That's how we prevent ourselves from falling, and it's widely it's disrespected in the fitness because most people are just climbing the Stairmaster thinking that's their commitment to fitness.
Is it disrespected? Fitness disrespects?
Well, I mean, it's ignored by most fitness enthusiasts.
So fitness enthusiasts is a completely different category, right? So now we've got athletes, competitive athletes. Are you still competing? I mean, you're
got the silver medal this year in the national championships,
right. So
Masters high jump.
You are a competitive athlete, and you have been since you're a teenager, probably.
Since age 7 or whatever.
Okay.
Right.
So, like, your understanding of movement is really heavily influenced by an competitive, athletic lens. Meaning, what you were told is the thing that you need to be doing is what you've learned, and this is an issue really in wellness culture overall, is a lot of the advice that's coming to everyday people is heavily informed by competitive athletes. Even the studies that are often done are usually done in kinesiology departments at university. The bodies that are being researched are usually teenage or young 20-year-old competitive athletes.
Right. Who else is going to sign up for some crazy exercise bike to exhaustion study, right?
Yeah, me. Yeah. But I was a total outlier, right? Because I did not come in with an athletic background. I came in with like a love for biomechanics and like how a nerd gets into a kinesiology department is how I got in there. And then would you say that there's a difference between the person who's always going on the Stairmaster? For me, that would be like general fitness. I used to call it like Shape magazine. I read, I read fitness or shit. I'm totally dating myself right now. These publications don't exist any longer.
I don't know. They don't?
I don't think
they
so.
They probably exist online.
A lot of publications don't exist
and
anymore.
Men's Fitness were the big magazines with, get 6-pack abs this way.
Yeah. Where you're like, I need to exercise 3 times a week and I need to get cardio. I mean, you're following basically government agency, medical agency guidelines by doing cardio this time. I would not call that person I still can't remember the term that you used for not the competitive athlete, but maybe the weekend warrior. I think the weekend warrior is often what we use. It's someone who is training to some goal, but they're not necessarily training every single day. Yeah. But they are following some of the same competitive athlete parameters because their goal is the performance, competition and performance.
Yeah, they want to enter an event and finish.
Yeah, and then you have general fitness.
Right.
And I think within the general fitness space, a lot of people are aware that they need to be working on not just cardio, but strength, flexibility, right? Like I feel like those 3 things always come packaged together.
You'd hope, but it seems like there's a lot of segmentation. Like generally you go into a fitness club and the females are working on the cardio machines and then going with their yoga mat. And maybe the guys are more inclined to go and work on the muscle machines when ideally you'd have, a blend. If you're a recreational fitness enthusiast, you want to have cardio, but you also want to have strength, power, balance, mobility, things like that. The fooling around that you do at the Power Project gym, doing one-legged rope swings and all that stuff. Most people couldn't be bothered or have not even been exposed to that.
They haven't been exposed. I think they haven't been exposed to it. And like what you were saying, that point, I think a lot of people are making choices based on body composition, right? I need to lose weight and do
burn
cardio,
calories.
Or I need to bulk up. Like you're making a choice specifically about what you think the body composition. So your movement why, I think it's really important that we identify what people's movement whys are. Their movement why is aesthetics. Now, there's going to be plenty of people in the gym who are there because their doctor's like, you got to get your blood pressure down. And the doctor probably said, and you need to do cardio to do that. So that's maybe why they're reaching for those things.
And billions of dollars of advertising behind it too.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I would say in science or in the research about it, I do think the messaging is often you need all these things. I'm always interested in what's happening between the messaging and what the choice the person is making when they walk into the gym. Like, I'm really interested, and that's where I spend my time, is educating people to know there's a lot of movements available at the buffet, and you need to build a plate based on your physiology, your age or stage. There's going to be different needs that sort of flex with that. And then also your preferences. What you like to do has got to be part of it. Like, we're not just eating minerals and vitamins. There's got to be, we're got to be like the Italians who abhor the American nutritional perspective where you eat for nutrients rather than for pleasure. They don't like it.
They probably have healthier overall.
And that's right.
By far diet.
That's right.
Yeah. Eating for pleasure. Yeah.
And I mean, of course, when you're limited to the ingredients that grow where you live, then by nature that works pretty well. It's working less and less though with the introduction of foods that don't work as well for the body.
Worldwide exportation. Yeah, I guess that's the reference to fitness is you don't want to go in there with a grim ascetic approach to fitness because you're not going to last that long. So we got to figure out things that light people up that they'll stick to, and that's where a lot of this marketing hype and this convincing people that the ultimate endurance achievement is to run a marathon or do an Ironman triathlon. And that's the billions of dollars of marketing behind it and the peer influence, and everybody, respects you more if you run a further distance, but it's not really aligned with health because it's too extreme and the training is too strenuous and the person is not adapted enough because of a sedentary dominant lifestyle to go and train for a marathon. Like the person on TV who just won the gold medal that ran 2 hours and change, and they're trying to do a 4.5 hour, and it's way too stressful for them.
Yeah, it'd be interesting just being done with the Olympics and winding down with the Paralympics. Did you see the one-legged high jumper?
I am so inspired and awed by these people, knowing that just to be silly, like the guy jumps higher than me with one leg. Yeah. So, of course, I'm going to be incredibly inspired. And then the guy in the pool that does the butterfly with no arms, he's faster than I can swim a 50 butterfly too.
That's right.
And, there's so many emotions that came up watching these people. One of them is like, it's so great to see it displayed and normalized, and they're winning and they're happy and they're not, brought down by their disability. And I also feel like all the people out there that do nothing with their body, and then we sit here and watch on TV and think that these people, the guy with no arms would kill to improve a half a second in his 50 butterfly, where he's just pumping through the pool with his legs. And it's like, hopefully people are watching this and saying, you know what, I'm going to get off my butt and walk a few miles because the person with one leg just, ran around the track faster than you can believe. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, athleticism is really there.
Oh, there's the one-legged high jumper for you watching on YouTube. Andrew's pulled up the clip, and yeah, he's jumping 171, which is 5'10", which is a stunning performance for anyone.
Over my head.
Yeah. Think about jumping over a bar 5 foot 10 inches tall. It's no joke. So he drops his crutches, flops over the bar 5'10", and hopefully he got the gold. I can't imagine too many people being able to beat that.
No, and I think the Olympics, I don't think of it as propaganda for movement and sports as much as it's like inspo, right? It serves its role in a culture. The tricky thing is, yes, when there's been a mesh up of athleticism and health. I think the inspo is good. Like, you always see an uptick, I think, of sign-ups for sports and like
soccer.
You're just like,
sign-ups. Yeah.
I'm impressed. And it's also, we live in a sedentary culture. How often do we spend 4 weeks watching physical feats? People holding their breath, watching the synchronized swimmers and being like, it's just, I think you exposed yourself to it. And so part of what I'm trying to do is like, if you expose yourself to athleticism, physicality, movement at whatever level more often, I think you're reminded that you want to do it. I think a big part of why we don't is it's off our radar. It's just off the radar.
Yeah, and I think we create, or there's difficult logistics because we think like during COVID, everyone say I got out of shape because my gym was closed. Like, excuse me, like, you know, and the kettlebells were sold out on eBay too, so I couldn't even do anything at home. And I'm making light of these quips, but it does illustrate how the collective mindset is that this fitness endeavor needs to be complex. In regard to the endurance programming, it needs to be highly strenuous. Otherwise, you're not a legit runner unless you're exhausted all the time and putting in all these miles and counting your miles every week as you prepare for the marathon. And so those in between ideas, like your workbook points out. Let's talk about the sloth and how we can categorize our daily life and then figure out ways to optimize.
Yeah, well. So I encourage people to look at their day or their week or their year in terms of domains in which they're spending time. Sloth, SLOTH, sleep, leisure, occupation, transportation, and home. These are the domains you're in all of the time. For most people, certainly the people that you're talking about, fitness and athletic competition is usually going to fall into the leisure category. Exercise is a leisure time activity. So people who have more leisure will be able to get more exercise because that's the container in which it falls within. Now, the blurry line would be professional athletes. That's occupation, right? So if you're actually making money doing it, and a lot of guidelines for movement come from people who move as an occupation, not competitive athletes, but like personal trainers. Right. And so what's important for that group to recognize is it's a lot easier to fit movement in when you've made it your occupation. For everyone else, they have to balance a full occupation. And so that's something I'm always aware of. And why I wrote this book was to really not assume that everyone was sort of a computer worker still. Like a lot of people are labor intense. They're active throughout the day, but they still don't feel great. Like they're getting they're like, look at my step counter. I'm getting tons of steps. My accelerometer is moving me around, but I'm doing such a highly repetitious set of movements that it's also not nourishing me. I don't have my movement macros down. I'm doing these, or maybe I've got too much of one macro, just like a diet. You're eating too much of one macro category and you're missing some vitamins and minerals. You can have adequate calories and still be malnourished with diet, and same goes for movement. So you got a movement volume issue you got to figure out, then you got a movement macros and then a movement micros across the sloth domain.
And if you're overweighted, like we were talking about before we turned the mics on, when I was an endurance athlete, extreme endurance athlete training triathlon, I did not. There was no movement quotient outside of my intensive workout regimen, and it was kind of a strange lifestyle. I mean, of course, I was fit, but I was so narrowly fit that, like, if the rainstorms came and I had to lift 25-pound sandbags to help my elderly neighbor not have her garage flooded, I'd wake up the next morning and I'd be all stiff and sore from, a minor physical ordeal that was outside of my narrow realm of swimming, biking, and running in a straight line. Yeah. And I think that's really common in the fitness scene. I mean, it's wonderful to see millions of people and mass participation growing and growing, but it's a lot of times a really narrow sliver. Yeah. And it, comes at a cost.
Well, if you look at the Olympics, it's so timely because they just ended. You can see there's a lot of different ways to be physically fit. You're sort of specialized. And so, the athletes look completely different. They have anthropometric dimensions that work better for some sports and are total crap for other sports. Yeah. And so there's that reality. Yeah. But what I'm always interested in is functional movement, which is something that I think the word gets used a lot, but I don't know if people really understand what functional movement means. I think functional movement as a term came up when everyone's like, hey, everything we're doing is very linear, right? Like I'm fit, I can lift heavy, but I can't reach my arms overhead anymore. That's not functional. I'm going to add, some things that go overhead to be able to do it. But functional for me means will this serve this, like due to the law of specificity, the movements that you're doing now are informing the movements you will be able to do in the future. What movements are functional for an average human, as we get older? And so like you could say, well, outside of disability that removes a lot of these movements, walking, carrying something, walking upstairs while carrying something, bending over to reach your feet, putting away your own groceries, being able to get up off the ground, reducing the amount of times you fall to the ground, right? Like there's a real strong set. And a lot of times athletics are about the performance of the sport. They do not necessarily prepare you at all for the functional activities. Sometimes they actually remove or decrease your ability to do it. But that mixed messaging where athletes are fit, check. They meet our definitions of fitness, but yet, and same for regular exercisers, right? Like they're meeting their physical fitness guidelines, but it's not organized to any one particular direction. Or I guess I should say a different way. If you are an athlete, your movement choices are to inform your performance at that sport in the same way that a soldier is not looking at longevity. They're looking at, I need to be able to do the movements that I'm doing for my job. Firemen, any sort of pilots, like if you have to do some physical feat, you're training to be able to do that longer. You're not necessarily thinking about it serving the future you. So we just want to make sure that I think that surprises a lot of people. I think it surprised you. That's probably how we met, was going,
right.
Oh, I am the sedentary athlete.
Right.
I am physically fit. I'm meeting all the guidelines, but the guidelines were so thin, they didn't really prepare me for doing these other things that I would have to do. I was
a purposeful, incredibly lazy person, because you need to be if you want to make those incremental performance gains. So it was all thoughtful and like, I couldn't be bothered to lift a finger. Those sandbags messed up my next day's workout, and I have a big race coming up.
Yeah.
But I think so few people need to be concerned with the highest levels of elite sport and all the compromises that you have to make. We can open ourselves up to a bigger perspective, and I'm contending that most fitness enthusiasts don't, not to mention regular people that don't get enough movement. But maybe talking to the fitness enthusiast for a moment, there's still a lot of narrowness and overly stressful training habits that compromise longevity in particular.
Or certainly, I don't know if it affects longevity. It affects future movement, like your ability.
Yeah, it might not affect your the date you die, but
exactly.
Like you're going to be hunched over more.
I think you mean like when you're older, as you're older, it's not a sustainable practice. Like I don't think people have really sustainable movement practices right now.
Yeah.
They're trying to chip away at the guidelines. They're following the guidelines. They're following the well-researched guidelines. I guess the tricky thing is, it's like the guidelines are putting a bunch of rocks into a jar, and you're like, this jar is full. It's full of all these guidelines. And then you come along with sand, and you're like, no, here's all these cracks that these guidelines missed. And that's what we're talking about and then you pull in the water, and it's like, oh, this still holds water. Like there's a lot more space here than we thought. We put 3 big rocks in a jar and said, here you go.
Right.
And what we're saying is those are great rocks. There's actually maybe nothing even wrong with the rocks, but the space around them in the jar, the context is more of an issue. But we're asking, someone to become a movement expert. We're asking to educate yourself to understand the science of movement well enough to be able to make a movement diet choice. Like maybe people are educated now enough to make a dietary nutrition choice.
Yeah,
we don't have that same framework for movement.
And the great thing is that it's so simple and integrative to whatever your lifestyle is, but it just hasn't, it's catching on thanks to you, but like I'm in the airport looking around and I'm the only one doing lunges, leg swings, isometric calf hold, and like everyone's waiting for the same flight. There's nothing to do, and I'm the only one putzing around or getting my mini bands out and doing monster walks, and I get strange looks, and my wife laughs at me. But it's like, why don't we all, have that type of mentality, knowing how important this is? You could do deep squats while you're in line at the taco truck, and these things add up over 365 days and so forth. But it's not a huge ask like it is to commit to 3 days a week at 6 a.m. for your spin class, and all the things that are intimidating and frustrating for a lot of fitness folks that are trying to juggle. I mean, you hear the excuses all the time, like, yeah, why don't you try it? I have to get my kids up for school, and then I have to do this, and then I have to do that, so I'm out of shape. And it's like, well, if we rewind and watch those patterns, there's so much opportunity for non-strenuous, really helpful, functional movement patterns.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things going on in everything that you were just saying there. I do think that our construct of exercise has been part of the problem. And I think that's what you're referring to when you're talking about the marketing that goes into exercise. Because there's not that, who's marketing exercise? Like these are just individual companies trying to sell their products, right? Like,
yeah, the fitness industry as a whole wants to get you sweaty and filled with endorphins, and that's all programming is pushing that promise. And then we forgot about the repercussions, and then how much safer and more easily integrated it is to just say, hey, why don't you rush up the staircase every time you have to go up it every day, instead of buy a $1,300 Stairmaster for your house or whatever it is.
Yeah. I definitely think a lot of individual companies are, they see the whole and they're creating a product to meet the whole, right? Like there's so many cold plunge tubs, but you might not think to just not wear a sweater, and let you know what I mean? Like, I think we have a hard time because we are training ourselves to think that the vitamin and mineral supplement was the food. Like even you can see how we've eaten. Like we've gone to more and more almost pre-nourishing ourselves with the supplements instead of looking at the whole diet to be like, what would a diet need to be that actually made it so I didn't need the supplements? And then slowly, no one even knows of the diet. They only know the supplements. And
you get this, people? Are you following? Like you're making the analogy to exercise.
Are you following?
Yeah. I just want to make sure people pause here and realize like what you're talking about is like if you have a foundation of an active movement-oriented lifestyle, and then you go and train for an event or do a competitive goal or do a fitness programming, that's the supplement. But we have it backwards is what you're saying. Yeah,
we just, I don't think we tend to value the minutes. We value the hours.
Right.
We don't value the light intensity. We value high intensity. And I think it might just be a characteristic of a human to be oriented to what you can see and feel. And so the louder it is, therefore the more beneficial it is. And if you're grappling with, again, not very much leisure time, or you have other priorities. I think it's really tricky for someone whose primary value is physical prowess, a certain physical aesthetic, to comprehend that other people would not have similar values to you. Right? Like, because you're like, I don't get it. I feel amazing here, and so you're talking about values. Now, we all share physiologies that have certain baselines. Like everyone needs water. I don't care what your value system is. You need water. And the same thing is, I don't care what your value system is. We all have a pretty robust baseline for movement. But just like diet, you can tweak it. Movement doesn't cross cultural boundaries very well. I'm sorry. Exercise doesn't cross cultural boundaries very well because this is the culture that created the construct of it. And then being like, why doesn't everyone like it? We had this highly sedentary and we figured out this problem and why don't you all like it? And meanwhile, there's plenty of cultures that are like, we just preserve the movement that we've always had. And it's great. And then there's plenty of people who don't move at all. And then inertia's a bitch. And like that inertia, which is a tendency to do the same thing that you've always said, like it's a psychological issue that we're mostly dealing with. And it's overwhelming. I'm actually working on, I have another book. Not even the book that's coming.
Another book in your head.
Yes. No, it's actually almost on paper. It'll be out next year that I wrote, am writing with a psychologist, Dr. Diana Hill, who studies ACT. It's like ACT therapy, ACT therapy. And in psychology, that helps you kind of break it down and figure out. And it's just a whole set of reasons people don't, I can't do it because of this. And it's just, I can't remember the number, like 40 excuses, reasons.
It's a good title for a book.
Yeah, exactly. I know I should exercise, but is the name of the is the name of the book.
Nice.
And then you have to figure out what is what is the skill set. There's a flexibility of mind we're missing, right? For you see movement as fitting into an airport, but a lot of people don't think that's okay. Like their backgrounds of what was told for them to do or not do, the amount of people that would find them disruptive, but maybe not you, maybe like the way you look gives you a greater pass for that kind of stuff. Like this guy's an athlete, like we're not going to bother him.
I just don't care about conventions and rules.
And maybe you don't care. Right.
I'm a unique example, but I do feel like people could join me a little bit. You could get a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. I actually wanted to work with a major airport to create movement-rich, permission-giving spaces, because I think that we believe that we need to be still to be okay, to make everyone else feel okay. And I was even thinking of just like reaching out to say, like, if you painted on the wall, like stand and stretch here, just that paint job would, one, tell people, giving them an idea, two, give them permission.
Even if it's empty.
Even if it's empty.
Still painted there.
I think people are afraid. They're like, I don't know if I should be able to go into this section of the airport where you're like, I don't care if someone's going to come yell at me. But a lot of people have been in situations where they don't have that that freedom, and so they're just more reserved in that way. So I'm trying to bring a broader understanding that I don't always think it's people don't know or they don't care. I think it's this world is a very built place, and the cultural construct is deep, and you have to really want movement. I think it's a kind of a salmon swimming upstream.
I mean, things are changing slowly in our lifetime, especially my lifetime when, I was a little kid, that smoking was allowed everywhere, including the Lakers basketball game. I'd go to the Forum and you'd see visible smoke with the stage lights coming from the top, like watching the NBA. It's unthinkable now. Or the smoking section of airplanes where you'd have to hold your breath before you made it to the bathroom on a transcontinental flight. So it's nice to see all that progress, but this movement thing, and to make it separate and distinct from the fitness industry and how many club memberships there are and all these, that there's 50,000 people finishing the New York City Marathon, but like, what about the people watching where they take the subway instead of walk a mile so they can clap and then go back to their apartment and sit there? That's where we need some progress.
Yeah, we just see them as two distinct things. Like, we're really focused on athleticism and we don't really recognize movement. We don't like NEAT, right? Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This idea that all the high volume of light activity minutes or movement calories, as I like to call them, we just don't find them valuable. Like we think we have no time a lot of the times, but it's like you'll be picking someone up and you'll just sit in your car for 8 minutes on your phone, and you could just get up and out of the car and
do leg swings.
You could do anything. You could just, even if you stood outside your car and reached to touch the top of it, right? That's a mobility exercise.
Yeah.
You don't even, if you feel uncomfortable swinging your leg around in your bright yellow shirt, then don't do that. But there's plenty of things you can do.
Yeah.
And I think we don't value minutes, right? We're telling everybody these big things that they have to have, because I think, from a governmental standpoint or like a medical institution standpoint, you see all the cardiovascular disease that's coming up, and you're trying to figure out what to tell that person, the minimums. And, doing a cardio machine for 20 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week will save your life.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they need. And so how do we hold space to say, this is what you need? And it's also not the only thing that you need. And I think that's the bigger message you're trying to get across is there's nothing really wrong with any of these activities. It's the context in which they're doing them that can sometimes set you up for failure, set you up for injury. And then, you're talking a lot of times about running, so that's even a greater impact thing. That's different than going on the elliptical 3 or 4 times a week. It's markedly different.
Mm-hmm.
There's impact. It's more free form. So it allows, think of the elliptical and the machine to kind of hold your feet in place. And you don't have any of that.
Right.
When you're running, there's no set, you think maybe you're supposed to strive for, should I be doing a 5K, a 10K? I don't know. Yeah. I just started. There's a lot of openness to it. I think that is a good place to get an injury or just not know how to go stepwise. I think we don't know how to go stepwise.
Yeah.
We're not trainers. How would we know?
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if it's, this pursuit of the dopamine high, the instant gratification that's overwhelmed modern life. Dr. Robert Lustig's book, The Hacking of the American Mind, he lists the 11 things that are the main, instant gratification with food, digital technology, intermittent variable rewards where you have changing, text messages and social media scrolling. And so if that mentality is applied to exercise and fitness, we're going for, like you mentioned earlier, we're going for the achievement and the finisher medals, and I'll do whatever it takes to get that medal and cross the finish line, even if it comes at the cost of my health. That mentality is probably leaking in there, where it's not as satisfying to spend 4 minutes while you're waiting in line doing some deep squats or whatever. It's more like, I'm going to go to the 6 a.m. class, rock the music, and sweat and get filled with endorphins, which we know is you're allowed. It feels good, but if you continue to chase that endorphin high, you become, in a sense, an addict. And there's a lot of downsides and negative repercussions to the extreme chasing of the endorphin high, which is a segment of the fitness industry is guilty of that, and they're pushing really hard. But even the medium person who's just a gym goer, they're not thinking of the other opportunities throughout the day that might add up to be even more important.
I mean, I do think you can absolutely drugify movement. If you ever read Dopamine Nation.
Who's the author?
Anna Lemke.
Yeah.
From
I had
Stanford.
her on my podcast.
Oh, yeah.
She was great.
I really, really
and then
enjoyed her
the
work.
detox, you need to stop for 30 days if you want to clear out your... Yeah, amazing.
Your habits, know. So, I do think you can drugify anything. I think that we are really so now constantly dopamined up. Dopamine's always available. It didn't used to be.
Right. You had to work for it.
Dopamine and movement really go hand in hand, those systems within the body. I mean, dopamine is sort of it's a neurotransmitter to get you moving.
Right.
So the fact that you can get it without moving, I think, is really problematic. It sort of disables your movement systems. And so, it's like the fact that you can watch someone else do a workout on Instagram. And
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah,
or just watch the Olympics. And,
that's right. It's very
be so inspired,
yes.
And then you don't have to exercise because you turn it on the next day and you're inspired again.
Well, who watches? Why do we have so many cooking shows? The number of people who watch cooking shows, these amazing things, and then never cook anything themselves. We are in this.
Is that a thing? It's a
total.
Is that a
thing.
research proven statement there? An assertion?
What
about the remodel shows? Same. Your shitty house full of crap all over, and they got a new bathroom, and they chose the blue counter to go with the yellow backing.
Yeah. It's just
like aspirational.
It's aspirational, but and I think it's supposed to be inspirational. But
I innocently asked a cold plunge manufacturer if they thought that their product was an aspirational purchase. So, if you pop for a cold plunge and you tell all your friends, "I just threw down a bunch of money to check out this thing in my backyard." It's like that whole experience of being that badass could be a driving force behind the purchase. They didn't like me asking that question. I was just saying, do you feel like these people are using it, or are they just buying it to be badass to show that they have a cold plunge in their yard? we'll find out, I guess, later. But hopefully they're enjoying it. But aspirational fitness membership is the centerpiece and the business model of the fitness industry,
Sure.
because they need to sell 7,000 memberships to make a profit and hope that only 300 people a day come. Otherwise, they'd go out of business because the gym would be too crowded and they'd demand 10 more facilities. So that literally is the business model of the fitness industry, is sell many more memberships than people who regularly show up.
That's interesting, because I hadn't really ever thought of it as a malevolent act. Like, this is what we're going to do. Like, and I don't even know. I mean, I've worked in a lot of gyms and even ran some. And that wasn't ever, I mean, it was just more the reality of, this is our space and we'll keep selling membership because someone might be stoked to come one day a week. But I can hear what you're saying there, which is, yes, the idea of there being one space in a town for most of the citizens of that town to come move in, it wouldn't really work if everyone was in fact motivated to use their membership every single, or able. Maybe people are motivated, but not able.
It would be, $250, $300, $400 a month or something. The numbers would go up because they'd have to build a 100,000 square foot fitness facility instead of 10,000, which would be great. I mean, let's make that happen. Let's see more people show up and force them to build bigger things.
But most gyms are empty. I mean, I shouldn't say most gyms. I don't even know. But I go to a lot of different gyms, and gyms are often spacious. They probably have their peak times because of schedules.
You have to wait for the machine.
Yeah. So
but they're operable, and they're not. There's a capacity the fire department puts on a building.
Right. They're
not maxing that out.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And besides that, we don't need a gym really to do so many things, and especially for most people are at. They need a staircase, a minivan that costs $4, some stretch cords that cost $50. We direct you to watch the Katie Bowman home tour with all the contraptions and the removal of the furniture that's causing,
But just walking. I mean, I think at the end of the day, what's your goal? And for a lot of citizens, it is simply, don't die of a heart attack when I'm 52, and in that case,
it's a good goal.
I think that's a fine goal, and it could be a daily walk that gets you there. So, I mean, different people have just different goals with their movement. And so, if they're going and doing their one thing, it probably has to do with either their goal, being easily attained by doing that volume of movement and that type of movement, or they're following external or extrinsic guidelines, and they're like, I'm just doing what the experts say to do. Like I'm just doing that to a T, which happens a lot. I mean, I know a lot of very fit people, even athletes who are like my body no longer works, and I followed even my training to my sport to a T, because what's not disclosed is we'll get to do this sport for this many years, and we just don't have the whole picture until we're on the other side of it.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, you're Simon Whitfield, your neighbor across the water.
I don't.
He's from Victoria. He's the Olympic gold medalist in triathlon in 2000, silver medal 2008. And I was interviewing him, after he retired, several years leaving the circuit. And I said, "What's your training like these days?" He goes, "Well, today I'm coached by my 80-year-old self." And it was the greatest one-liner.
That's right.
He wants to honor his 80-year-old self, looking down and seeing what workouts you're doing today, as opposed to when he's going for the gold medal. Obviously, that's something in the 80-year-old self would frown upon, except for there are other elements there. But a lifelong commitment to fitness.
It's the body politic, right? You are your own political landscape, and different parts are negotiating for power at some times, and to be aware that it's just trade-offs. You're constantly making trade-offs. It's just that I don't think everyone recognizes that they're making trade-offs. And I don't think you get to know them all either. Life's very unpredictable. Trying to control life is tricky. I think you want to be prepared for a lot of things, but a time of injury and not being able to move can absolutely hit anyone at any time. And you can't really avoid it. And I think when you're more of like the worried well type, where you're like the optimized, like I'm going to make sure nothing ever goes wrong. I'm going to stay in front of this thing all the time.
Yeah.
There's going to be a time where that doesn't work out for you. But stepping into it as, I think you need to be physically prepared for whatever happens. But I think you also need to be mentally prepared to know that you don't get to control everything, and movement doesn't offset all of the things. Like both of those realities are true. Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, everybody.
You do the best you can. There's no guarantees.
Nope.
Yeah. I wonder what's one of the things that I feel is in the way now is the digital age and the constant ability to be entertained and connected, which probably compromises movement more so than any other thing on the health checklist. Sleep, and movement, and being my age, almost 60, like half of my life or more was completely devoid of an internet connection. So I can harken back to those times where, especially as a kid, you're bored, you get out and move around. And now I guess that's, been managed by screen engagement. You're never bored. You don't have to go and do anything.
Yeah. You were saying you can recall those times by hearken. I imagine you're you can remember.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you can also call on the skill sets that you developed during that time? Or are you just remembering?
The way I think about this is I'm, as far as managing my own hyperconnectivity and screen addictions and so forth, I feel like I'm highly vulnerable type, maybe because of that ADHD you guys were talking about in the other show. And I'm quick thinking and quick moving, and I want to get a lot done in a day, and I want to never be bored and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I feel like I'm an easy target. And so I have to exert a ton of discipline and mindfulness to not succumb. And I feel like I'm doing a decent job at that. And I like to turn my phone away and put it away or this and that. But at the same time, like if you get me going, I'll be watching high jump videos on YouTube instead of writing my book. And I realize that, like, come on, doofus, get back to your manuscript. And so it's like a constant daily battle for me, but I'm hyper aware of it because I'm such an easy target for the algorithms, I suppose.
I just had like 5 thoughts in my head.
Yeah.
So
that's a mouthful right there.
It's a lot. I mean, I think that this is what we're up against. And I think, as I have kids in this age, into this, this age of information, age of digital information. My priority is to make sure they have the muscle memory of not having those things as opposed to not having it. Because I do think part of exerting a little decision-making around it is that you can recall, you've had some skill sets of what do I do without this? Where I think a lot of the future generation does not have a skill set. There is no muscle for not having it. I'm teaching a volunteer teaching a class about cyber civics for elementary school kids. And we were talking, I'm like, where's the internet? How old is texting? And just to hear their thoughts around, they can't operate they can't imagine their world as they know it being different 8 years ago. You know what I mean? Like it's ubiquitous for them. Yeah. And so I just am trying to give them, maybe it's the same reason that people go to Renaissance fairs or to, or to go, when you go to like the visitor center of, in place for different indigenous peoples, you'll be like, and here's what was eaten in this space. And here was the house building technique of the time. Like you're seeing, you're trying to keep a memory of the broader picture. So I think that is really important. And then also, I think, as you were saying, to recognize the novelty of this environment. What I was thinking when you were saying is the trouble with the algorithm is that it's on a device that you also find pretty useful, where Halloween candy doesn't really have something that you would say, I have to keep it in, I got to keep it around. Like, I'm not going to not give
blood sugar drops. Of course I need something
exactly. Yeah. Like we just have this whole narrative around this tool. Yeah. But imagine that everyone said, well, in order to get a membership to Costco, you have to flash me a piece of Halloween candy, right? Like as everyone's woven Halloween candy into every single thing, of course everyone has to have one. And so like I definitely am trying to like figure out when something doesn't really have a beneficial purpose, it's easy to put it in a category. It's easy to step away, to leave it. It's a lot harder when you've said it's an essential tool. Your kid can't go to school without one. You can't fly on a plane without one. I mean, like, we're weaving it into the fabric of everything. So then, you know, unless you, I mean, it's not even just like a flip phone. Like a flip phone won't even work in all these scenarios.
Right.
You know, it has to be.
Where's your boarding pass?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, let me go through my tiny photos and see if I can see if you can scan the QR code from this teeny tiny photo. But I definitely think it's impacting movement more than we think it is. It's impacting not just like easy things, posture, total physical activity. I think it's derailing your inertia. It's derailing your ability to make the choice to move. I mean, it's like having to go uphill carrying a giant bag. It's like I think of the movie The Mission with Robert De Niro. Did you ever see that? And he's dragging around. You know, he's kind of just had this huge anchor, like chains, and he's punishing himself to drag it all around. But I feel like it's like an albatross, this sort of, you're dragging it around for this, you know, good thing that it might be good for. But I like Anna Lemke's work. She's like, turn off, you know, put it on grayscale. Get rid of some of the brain harnessing effects a little bit. Get rid of some of the apps. See if you can truly prune it down to the actual good parts and not the stuff that's, you know, like the same reason I take junk food out of my house. You know, if I'm trying to get everyone focused on eating a certain way. Yeah,
that's an obvious one that everyone can relate to and probably a lot of people doing a good job at, but this one's a little more of a tougher battle when you talk about the technology.
It's tougher because, again, you got to keep, like, when you've made choices, like no one wears a watch anymore because they got a phone, you know, and no one has a map anymore.
At least,
Yeah. So it's just I think it's hard to leave it, right? It's just, we got to get practice in leaving it, and not only for screen-free weeks or whatever, but for a couple hours every day. Like you don't need to be looking at it in the toilet in the first 15 minutes of your day.
Yeah, I mean that's one of my strategies is I jump out of bed and I immediately begin my morning exercise, because if I don't, I'm going to get sucked in. And you talk about the inertia before, and you know it affects so many things. One of them is your dietary habits are influenced by your inactivity, your screen habits, I'm sure. And so you just kind of get lulled into the classic modern life approach where, you know, you're sacrificing your health just to, I guess, get dopamine triggers throughout the day.
Well, if you're meant for, dopamine triggers are how we work. It's harnessing our nature. We're not really going against nature. Like we're right with it. They've figured out how to harness our nature right with it. Right. It's just sort of our missing scale.
We're still following all our primal biological
We're following
drives.
our blueprint.
Yeah.
This is what our blueprint does in this scenario. So since it's all reflexive, to me, the thing to change is the environment. If not, you have to start dealing with things like willpower and you know, and those are tricky spaces.
It's a diminishing
to be in
resource.
It's a tricky. Like I don't want to have to be making choices.
Yeah,
like
use
that
more
all the
willpower, everyone. That's the secret.
Attentional
Thanks,
fatigue,
asshole.
Yeah, we're fatigued attentionally, not just what we're consuming, but what we're trying to not consume.
Yeah,
every minute of the day because it's so available. So just I wonder what filming of a video of my house would be like today, you know, like
2024
exactly version. You know, it's, you know, we have a TV, but we have a TV, we have a television.
People, go look at the 2014 version of
no TV.
Yeah,
well, we have
jungle gyms and
we still have that
monkey bars,
but our TV goes away. There's no TV set up in a house. We haul it out. We want to watch something, and when we're done,
you're an owner of a TV.
We're an owner of a TV.
It's on a shelf in the closet. Let's bust it out. Let's watch a movie.
It's in the closet under the blanket. Yeah.
So, there's Andrew pulling up the old version.
Oh, those are the days.
You look exactly the same today, though. That's interesting.
All I see is before I had gray hair.
So you're looking at like an
Before my spirit was beaten down.
indoor jungle gym in a kid's bedroom, and Katie's discussing how this is what kids need.
And us.
Instead of whatever the race car bed or whatever the modern spoiled kid gets. I don't know. So the environment, I mean, we had a whole podcast of you telling me how you're walking around town and you walk 44 miles on your 44th birthday and all that aspirational stuff that maybe a lot of people won't do. But like
But you can take a walk around your block.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really, I discovered if I didn't get outside within like the first 20 minutes of waking up, it'd be really hard to get out the rest of the day. It's like I just sort of settled into whatever I started doing. And so going outside, whether it was for 10 minutes or I try to like walk for an hour in the morning as it's a way to connect with my friends if I can.
Yeah, I remember you walked to PrimalCon when you presented at our conference in Oxnard, and we're like, "Do you need a ride? We'll pick you up. Your talk is at 10 a.m." She goes, "No, I'm good." Or your talk was early in the morning, but you left at like dark 100 to walk numerous miles to the main stage, and then here she is. She's coming. Here she is across the park. You can see her walking.
She's literally there. She goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love walking for transportation. Very, very functional. And it fits in. Walking for exercise, harder to fit in the volume that I'm after. Because again, I don't have a lot of leisure time.
Too busy writing books every day.
Well, I mean, just life is busy. Like, you know, we just don't have a ton of leisure time. I try to optimize. I'm not just trying to optimize my physical self, but like we do a lot of things in the community and with other families and volunteering. Like I'm thinking of optimization in a community-rich way. And I can't be the center. I'm not the center all the time. So I have to figure out a way to get my needs met while I'm not the center. Because I think the nice thing about leisure time and movement is you're self-centering. And I think that that's healthy to do. But I think not always doing it is also healthy to recognize that you're a member of a family. You're a member of a community. Yeah. And so how do you get movement in those spaces too? That's my jam.
And especially, you know, being creative with the workday and those other things on the sloth list.
Yeah.
There's so many things to do. I remember when I asked you permission if it was okay for me to switch from stand up to sit down to sitting on the ground, because I buzz around, I go into different rooms during my workday. I'm working on my laptop and you're like, that's the best. I'm like, all right, I got permission.
Fidgeting, right? Because you've been told the whole time probably that fidgeting was breaking up their ability to focus or whatever you're, you know, you're messing up the classroom focus. Yeah. But no, flexible.
It was also that I couldn't stand up all day. Like some people, they stand up all day at their desk. I'm like, shit, I can't do that. My back gets sore, my foot, my whatever. Yeah. So variation. Hey, this was fun. I know you got a busy weekend schedule and off to the next races. So thanks for sharing. I think, you know, I've pulled out some great, inspirational tips, how simple it is to just sprinkle stuff in, which is kind of one of your main messages. Don't overwhelm yourself, but get out there and walk first thing in the morning. Yeah. You're telling me you're too busy, you don't got 5 minutes to take the dog out, especially, or something like honoring something bigger than yourself.
Go to bed early, slipping in on the other side.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Going to bed early, too. All right.
Slipping in on the other side. If you're like, I just can't get up, go to bed early. Like, that's a good time. As you know, everyone who's listening to your podcast will know. Probably say, put your phone away an hour or two before bed. You know, is that
all those great tips? Yeah.
That are so hard to do.
Unless you're my sister, she's on call. I said, she has an excuse. She can have her phone by her bed. The rest of you are not that important. Put it away, put it far away, whatever.
Yeah. Just get it. It doesn't need to be part of your, it's not a pillow. You know, it's not like your pillow and your blanket and your phone. This is pajamas and pajamas going to need to have phone pockets pretty soon just so you can keep your BFF with you all the time.
I play my Raindrop app, so sometimes my phone is nearby when I want to, take a nap or fall asleep, right? But, that's why it's so useful. It's on airplane mode, though, so I'm not getting... Yeah.
It's just that it can get anything. It's nice to sometimes not have the exact thing you think you need so that you can get the other things that you do need.
Well said. I think we got a lot to think about. Thanks for listening, watching, everyone. Katie Bowman, killing it as usual. Thank you, Andrew Z, for hanging out, pulling up those videos. Power Project Studios here in Davis, California. I enjoyed crashing them once again.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.